Hello, everyone. Today we are starting a new series of podcast in which we will sit down with business leaders and professionals who are shaping the change and creating a real impact in their field.
Welcome to New Zealand Speaks. I'm Abhishek.
And I'm Harshit.
Today we will have a real conversation that will bridge learning, leadership, and culture.
And we couldn't think of a better guest than our very known Dr. Jeffrey Stangl, who is Associate Dean for International and Executive Education at Massey University.
Dr. Stangl has been the driving force behind Global Partnership for 18 years, bridging between academics, leadership, business, and not just in New Zealand, but across 22 countries. So he has a governance role in corporates, public sectors, and non-profit organizations. He is known for being one of the innovative and proactive leaders, not only in New Zealand, but across the globe. Thank you, Dr. Jeffrey, for being here, sparing your time. Really appreciate it. It's really honored to have you and kicking off our first series of the podcast.
The first series, I'm very flattered. Thank you for inviting me. And by the way, please just call me Jeff, because I would say one important difference between Western education and, say, other countries, Asian, is that the relationship between the professor and, the students tends to be more informal, which we think helps facilitate learning a lot.
Well, thank you for that, Jeff. I really appreciate that. And you said right. In my experience, I have been connecting with people, and just like yourself, and they cannot, emphasize more on how relationship works.
Yeah.
But from a leadership standpoint, I would like to know that you started as an entrepreneur, and from the world of corporate, you shifted your career into the education sector.
Yeah.
What inspired that shift?
What inspired that shift? In actual fact, as many things in life, the shift from businesses, I've been an entrepreneur all my life. Just to set the stage work, I left school before I was 17 years old and started a business. And I've been a business person, entrepreneur for 25 years. We moved to New Zealand with the idea of starting a new business. I came to Massey University 22 years ago to do my PhD. I had no intention of being an academic. I wanted to take some time off and retool. But I love universities, which is what drew me back. But I actually love the teaching. And while running a business is very, very, very rewarding in its own rights, teaching to me, particularly maybe, a later stage of my career, it just really is very fulfilling. So it was a serendipitous change. It had nothing to do with long-term planning, but the key point I would make is that you need, as a person, a student, you need to be willing to embrace opportunities. You can't just run through life with a very fixed view of what your life looks like. Your life's journey takes many twists and turns, and you have to be willing to say, "Hey, I didn't think about this, but I think I'll be an academic." So that's the long, short answer of it.
That's really amazing. And as an MBA candidate, I have the first-hand experience looking at how you're bridging that gap in leadership, the real-world academics, and people, community, and the business. Good to know. You have worked across 20 countries, right, based on my research. And so in your view, what shapes the New Zealand business culture, and how do you compare it with other world as well?
Certainly one of the aspects we teach you in the MBA program is this idea of cross-cultural communication. It's not so much what, differentiates the New Zealand business mindset. Every country is different. So I've lived in 4 different countries. I've worked in more than 20 countries. The key to success, in assimilating into a country, doing business in another country, is just to understand, that everybody's a bit different. Your question was, how is New Zealand different? New Zealand is very much, it's more of a, I would say, more of a genteel mindset. Americans, I'm American, tend to be a bit more pushy. We tend to be a bit more aggressive. We tend to be a bit more competitive. New Zealand, they operated a different kind of, it's more of equality. It's more fully about respect. It's really, we're in some ways working much more collaboratively. So it's kind of an equal relationship. So you just have to understand that relationship. And I think the beautiful part of the Maori culture, which is New Zealand, and at the heart of New Zealand culture, the Maori culture is very respectful of community, of people, and giving each other that respect. So that's the difference with the business kind of mindset. I would say the other thing is that the New Zealand people and business people particularly, they place more of a value on quality of life, balance. I'm American. I tend to probably work too much. I work a lot in East Asia, China. Everything's push, push, push. Things don't move as fast here, which is okay. And people don't aspire to necessarily to great wealth. But, you need to understand what motivates people to do business with other cultures cross-culturally. You need to understand what motivates them, and you need to understand, their cultural background. And if you understand that and recognize that every culture is slightly different, then, you'll be fine. But you can't go into a country and push my Americanism on New Zealand or China or elsewhere, because it just won't.
That's so true. So, Jeff, what you mentioned about the New Zealand culture, it's quite true. I mean, you rightly said that how they put trust and relation as their first priority as part of their community. So, as an associate dean of Massey University, being the driving force behind the university, what do you think that how universities are shaping the future leaders, the immigrants who are coming to this country, relying on the university to become the leader that New Zealand want to see?
That's an excellent question. And can I just be 100% honest with you? It's a very, very difficult, challenging time and rewarding time to be a university and to be a university leader. Because the change that we all witness is happening so increasingly rapidly that we have to keep on top of it. So it's fair to say that the way universities operated, in my opinion, and Massey Business School's opinion, is very different than it was when I started Massey University 22 years ago. The curriculum changes so fast. What we teach you today potentially will be irrelevant, in 2 years' time. So at Massey Business School, we certainly embrace the change and embrace the challenge in how we go about develop the next generation of business leaders. So while I'm finance, while I might teach you financial theory, I'm also teaching you the 5 C's. And the 5 C's, critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration, and a sense of community, the 5 C's, we embed in everything we do. So we do a lot of teamwork. It's important that you, as students, learn how to work in teams. It's not easy, right? But because the problems that you'll be confronting are so much more complex, I have a certain skill set, but I don't have a mastery of every skill needed to solve a complex problem. So I need to partner with others that work and to get the most out of the partnership and the working relation. So collaboration, critical thinking, obviously. The number one skill we teach our students is critical thinking, to question the what, the why, the how, the who, the when. Not just go, oh, read this textbook. Okay, that's all I need to know. That's not enough. That is not enough. And Massey Business School is very, very good at encouraging critical thought and discourse. Communication, big thing. When I speak to employers, and I do part of my job is, bridging university with practice, the employers, number one, are looking for good communicators. So how are we preparing our students? That's exactly how we do it. Yes, we teach you the technical competencies, absolutely. But as equally important are the 5 C's, to teach you to be a 21st century leader, to get a job anywhere, New Zealand and anywhere else. That's what's essential. That's what Massey Business School is focused on. And we have a very good record with employers. on turning out graduates who have all of those qualities, who will go on to contribute to their organization.
That is something which, as a current student of Massey Business School, something that we have been listening and we have been learning throughout the course during our MBA. These 5 C's is something which is now has been embedded in our heart, not just only the brain. And I think it's very important how we are embracing these 5 C's. But then you just mentioned that it's very important that how we embrace this for this challenging period, right? And I think it's not challenging period in New Zealand, but across the globe, right? So what would you say, in your view, what are those challenges that a new leader or an upcoming future leader who aspire to work in this New Zealand corporate working world, what are those challenges which you would want us to be prepared for?
So the skills that you will bring, to a New Zealand company or elsewhere, first of all, you have to identify the value that you will add to any organization. So if you're looking for work here in New Zealand, you have to look at it from, the employer's perspective. How will you add to their bottom line? Companies aren't going to hire you because they think you're a pretty smile, right? They're going to hire you because you will contribute to their profitability. Let's be honest, right? So the first thing you have to do is you need to look when you go in for an interview, say, for example, and through your career, be continually asking yourself, how am I adding value to this organization? You go into the interview, you say, right, here's how I'm going to increase your bottom line. I'm a critical thinker. I'm a great communicator. I'm creative, great collaborator. I consider the broader stakeholder community. I understand your company. I'm going to be able to apply my skills. This is how I'm going to contribute to the growth of your company. That's how you succeed in New Zealand. That's how you get promotions in New Zealand or elsewhere. You don't just go in doing the minimum amount or saying, well, I'm here, hire me. You're not going to get a job. That's just the reality of it. All companies are looking for energetic hires who will add to their bottom line. Self-survival. And particularly and right now, in the current environment where, economic times, economies go through cycles. We're kind of at this point now, companies are really trying to rationalize why they want to pay you $150,000 a year. You got to make money for them, right? So you need to identify that. You need to go in with that mindset.
That's quite insightful, Jeff. But in terms of challenges, like at this point of time, what kind of challenges that organizations are facing that any candidate, right, should look into and think from a problem-solving standpoint? What would be those key challenges? And specifically, I'm not talking about people who are actually living in this country, but people who are outside this country and they want to come to New Zealand because they see New Zealand as, as their future place of life.
The number one, not the number one, but it's certainly decided competitive advantage for you or other internationals looking to migrate, as I did, to New Zealand, is bringing with you a wealth and diversity of experiences. Companies and New Zealand companies in particular, we're a very small island nation, a trading country who is reliant on the rest of the world and who is reliant on emerging and developing markets elsewhere for their growth. So the perspective that you bring and diversity of thought that you bring is invaluable, actually. You coming from South Asia. South Asia, it's the largest or maybe second largest economy in the world. India is certainly, and that's a huge, huge market. And your knowledge and cultural awareness of what it takes to do business in South Asia, that's an advantage. And don't underscore that. Don't come to New Zealand and think, oh, I just want to, assimilate. You do need to assimilate, but that I'm just going to adopt wholly, the perspective of doing business in New Zealand without trying to integrate your experiences, your wealth of knowledge, living in a different country, growing up in another country. That's invaluable. I mean, me as an American and having lived in Indonesia for 11 years, having lived in China, that makes me unique. And that makes me more hireable. And to be honest with you, when I started Massey University 22 years ago, what made me attractive and the reason I got hired in part was because I had the business experience. And number two, I brought with me a different cultural diversity and understanding of doing business in other countries, which is important. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think you don't want to downplay or underestimate the importance as a migrant of your migrant experience and sell that. Don't come in and downplay the fact that you weren't born in Auckland. That's a value. Because here in New Zealand, not relative, but if you compare other Western countries, they're putting brakes on migration. New Zealand, as at November next week, as loosening the migration settings. We want migrants to come to New Zealand to help grow our business. And that's a big difference in Australia, Canada, UK, certainly the US. That's a huge difference. And we're a small country of 5 million people. We need international expertise to grow our country and to raise the standard of living in our country so we have more tech industry. I mean, coming from South Asian, as is well known for being very, very technologically oriented, right? That's a skill. We have enough, New Zealand's largely an agricultural economy and we do an amazing job, but we're looking to grow into, more high salary positions. So we move up the OECD ladder of, the 32 countries that are OECD. We're down at the bottom right in terms of, salaries. We're looking to, raise that. And we need the immigrants to help do that. So that's a real advantage.
I think that's really great perspective for our viewers because as an immigrant, when we come to, not in New Zealand, I think any country we go, right? First pressure that we have is how we can adapt. We want to adapt. And I think it's a great point that adapting is important, but ensuring you have your unique capability.
Absolutely.
Your unique value propositions, right?
Exactly.
And that we should not forget, right?
Yeah.
And I think it is something which is highly valuable to the New Zealand culture.
That's right. No, 100% true. Adapt, assimilate. I over the years have had any number of international students who have failed to assimilate and they wondered why they weren't getting a job. Because yes, you have a unique USP, which is your cultural identity, but you also need to have the cultural awareness of, assimilation into the New Zealand culture and knowing that, you need to kind of bridge, both worlds. And I know when we ran our business in Indonesia, the role that we played that was invaluable was, we quite understood the Indonesian culture. I can speak Indonesian, which is key to any culture, but I also understood the Western culture. And we always pictured ourselves as kind of the rubber band in the middle because we were being pushed and pulled by both sides. So we were that piece in the middle that helped connect businesses in America or Europe with, our manufacturing in Indonesia. That's the same exact thing that you're talking, here with new migrants to New Zealand. You've got that cultural background, come to learn the New Zealand way of doing business to start out our discussion, and then marry the two together. You will find yourself in a fast-paced career trajectory because you offer that unique perspective that most people don't have.
That's really amazing. And I mean, this is the purpose of our podcast as well, to actually tie the perspectives, knowledge, and the experience of leaders like you who have, transitioned from many countries across the geography, right? And it gives us a broader understanding as well as a detailed perspective that how we should prepare ourselves and how we can navigate our way towards success in New Zealand. And not in New Zealand, but across the globe.
Globally.
Exactly. Just one last question to wrap up this podcast first episode. We have talked about leaders, aspiring leaders, New Zealand, and the global market as well. Now, just in your view, what makes New Zealand as one of the most distinctive place for future leaders?
So what makes New Zealand one of the distinctive countries to develop or to grow global leaders? I think, it's inherent in the New Zealand DNA because we are a trading nation, and also to our cultural origins with the Maori tradition, of respecting communities, individuals, the environment. This all kind of comes together at this time and place as we see, there's a lot of stresses throughout the world. We need to have more compassionate leaders. We need to have more foresighted leaders who aren't necessarily just looking at today's bottom line. And I think the New Zealand way of doing business really lends itself to that, which sounds a bit soft and fuzzy. I understand that. But I think as a leader, what you would have learned through the MBA course is that we mutual respect. You lead, you don't lead from pushing people, to go maybe directions they don't want to go. You lead from the front, and you lead by showing empathy, compassion, and respect. And I think that's very much the New Zealand way of doing business. And while it maybe won't seem like it now with the current state of the global economy and global geopolitics, that's a good place to start from. So if you start from a basis in mutual respect, helping work together, the fifth C is community, understanding that regardless of different cultural backgrounds, we all have the same aspirations as people. So you need to recognize that, and recognizing as a leader how you're going to help your team, your organization, your company to develop, holistically, as opposed to myopically looking at, bottom line. And the way we see global negotiations taking place, one country in particular that will remain nameless, that's not the way you lead and develop long-lasting relationships. It's divisive. So adopt the New Zealand way of doing business. Take on board what you've learned, the technical, competencies, but take on board also sort of the New Zealand way of your learning. I suspect that you found very different. That is the ethos, I would argue, in my opinion, of the future global leader. Someone who leads from the front with compassion and respect, and recognizing that, you need to continually be looking at the bottom line, but where the bottom line constitutes something more than the traditional single entry bottom line. We've got a quadruple bottom line. New Zealand is very good at, they're very, very good at that. And I think New Zealand as business people are respected around the world. And I believe that will be increasingly so with the changing paradigm, of the global situation. I believe that New Zealand will be further recognized as a global leader in business and elsewhere. And you coming to New Zealand to do your studies, to learn a bit about the New Zealand way of doing business, in addition to developing that global mindset, global strategy, global sense of governance, you as students will be absolutely well armed and prepared to go on and become amazing global leaders. And in turn, you will have incredible careers.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was an amazing and one of the most insightful conversation. Two pieces for me that first, leadership. It's about leading from the front with compassion and respect. And for immigrants who are willing to come to New Zealand and, navigate their way for the future. I think one of the most important they can take from this conversation is how they can adapt and how they can bring their unique value proposition, their unique capabilities. Thank you so much, Jeff. It was really amazing conversation with you. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're welcome. It was my absolute pleasure. I mean, I think I applaud you for what you're doing with New Zealand Speaks. I can't wait to see subsequent podcasts. Thank you for inviting me today. Hopefully there's been some value in our discussion. I'm sure you've had some very insightful questions. Thank you very much. And I'm glad I've been able to share some of my experiences and wish New Zealand Speaks all the best.
Thank you.
Going forward. Thank you very much.
So if you enjoyed our conversation today, stay tuned for more inspiring voices.
Do let us know in the comment how you like it and what do you expect in our next video. Stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, which is NZ Speaks.
See you soon.
Thank you.